Ivar stood on the scorched dirt, looking at the bodies laying about the field. Young men and old men alike cleaved apart and impaled. The 8 guards did not know what was coming. He had done what his masters have asked of him. His sword was crimson. His clothes were soaked with blood and sweat. The last man on the list was leaning against an old plaster wall, moaning and groaning, holding his bloody side. A black shafted arrow lodged deep in his ribs between his fingers. His bodyguard was no match for Ivar's training and skill with the sword. The last and nearly dead guard stood with the trembling hands and weak body to face Ivar. He looked down at the sword, bending over to pick it up. The guard struggled with the thought of pain and fighting a man that had just killed most of his friends. With a weak, shaky hand, he stood as straight as possibly he could. It was his weak attempt to stop Ivar. The guard lunged at Ivar, mostly stumbling over himself. Ivar swatted the sword aside, then jammed his dowel into the chest of the guard. With a twist, Ivar jerked it out, pulling a piece of skin with it. The guard grunted, then fell to his knees. He stood over the body and mumbled, "Should have stayed down." Ivar turned around, looking at the wounded man near the wall. He swung his sword at the ground to remove the extra blood from the dowel. Then he placed the blade in a cradle of his bicep and forearm. He pulled the sword down in a way to wipe any blood from the metal. The target began to search for something in his brown coat as Ivar started to make his way towards him. In Ivar's mind was something that needed to be done to fill the cup of vengeance for his family. He had begun to believe that this was the right path. The man began to mumble to himself as he searched inside his pockets. "Kill him and get it over with. Show your wrath." A familiar voice echoed in Ivar's head with a pinch. "Let him taste your blade." The wounded man quickly pulled out a piece of paper, and with bloody hands he showed it to Ivar. "You have been killing the wrong people." With a shaky right hand, he unfolded the paper. "These are the names you need to topple the church." "You lie." Ivar stepped forward, adjusting his thrust. "No!" He adjusted his hands and pointed to the seals and the signatures. "This was sanctioned by them and paid for by them." "He lies. He works for them. Wet your blade and satisfy me with his blood on your sword." The voice stung his head once more. Ivar took the bloody, crumpled paper and began to look at the names. He recognized the names that were listed there. All the ones that he had saved or protected, including one who he trusted and believed in. This man had played a double hand and gained the most from Ivar's missions. He played his emotions and weaknesses and sent him to kill innocent people. This realization angered Ivar until he could feel the strength of the one in his head grow. See, I speak the truth. He coughed up blood. He looked at the dark blood in his hand with a concerned look and said, "Take me to the nearest healer, and I will help you set this right. Trust me." Ivar balled his fist with the paper in his hand at the two words, "Trust me." He now knew that he could not trust anyone but himself. All that he had put his faith in or trusted had failed him. So, Ivar dealt the death blow. "Don't trust anyone." The voice stung his head, the back of his head. He would now have to trust in what no one anyone else. The man realized that he was talking to someone that had no more trust for anyone. Ivar adjusted his feet. "Pray to the gods that you will hear your lying prayers." Before the man could speak a response, Ivar jammed the dowel into the head, pinning it to the plaster wall. Ivar now stood in a field of death once more. This list brought back memories of the past. All he could think of was his family. He had lost all those years ago. The man's hand fell to the ground. Ivar would have thought nothing of it, but it drew his attention to a piece of linen